And welcome back to Propped by the Bar. Although we are on location this episode, we are probably situated in the best backdrop that we've ever had, and we are lucky enough to be in the Bisinella's head office out at Lara. So we do have an interview with the director of Bisinella, Richard Bisinella, coming up quite soon. So look forward to that chat. Gareth?
Not a bad spot out here at Lara, is it?
Well,
oh, you youngs in the background, a rabbit running past that we should have got some mixo into before earlier.
That's not the green screen. That's not a green screen.
It's not a green screen. But
so market, tell us.
Well, the market's been interesting because we are obviously grand final week. We have lower listings numbers out there than we normally do. But the good thing is the auction clearance rates right across Geelong and Melbourne were pretty strong, up around the 70%, 73% from Melbourne, 70% at Geelong.
They've been 70s for probably the last 3 or 4 weeks.
It does show you that, we've had some continued demand. So it's really, we have now, in my view, come off the bottom. We are in the growth phase again. We're in the start of a new cycle, and in that new cycle, I believe it'll be a prolonged cycle. It won't be like a fast rise to the top, but we are certainly turned the corner.
Driven by rates?
Increased demand. Rates have increased demand, I think. And as the other thing that might kick in now is as 1st of October, the first home buyers grants and everything kick in, where they can get their 5% deposit.
Do we like that?
Yeah, well, the government says 20,000 new people will be able to buy previously.
Borrowing a lot of money for young kids.
It is. Yeah. But I think if you're buying in the right places, I think that's good investment. Yeah,
is it given in one hand and taken it with the other?
Of course it is. That's how the government rolls. Yeah, we giveth and we taketh. But especially in the housing market, in the affordable housing market, because they giveth you 5% deposit and they taketh you 47% of the land value.
So it's a good idea then.
It's a good idea for the government. So just paying themselves circular monetary. But in Lara, as for example, you've got, and we'll find out in a minute in the interview, but you do have an area which is quite unique because it never had a decline in when the COVID and everything corrected over the last couple of years. Lara, for example, if you were to come out and buy your first home in Lara, where you've got infrastructure and highways and you're close to Melbourne, that is good investments. And it is under that Lara's got I think we're at 750 or 780 medium house price. So therefore you're within that 950 cap for your first home buyers. For this region. So you can certainly apply for that. So no, I think that's good. I think so. We're certainly coming off the bottom. I think the market's starting to recover. There's a bit more demand at auctions.
We're seeing a lot more stock being listed for auction.
Yes.
Which means you generally will take a property to auction if you're going to get competition.
Yes. And so you're starting to get competition with the agents. Is that what a lot of your guys are saying as well?
Yeah. So we're going to see a bigger than normal probably auction period residentially coming up, I think.
Yeah, wow, that's good. And it's an increase off the bottom. And even in the land estates, there was a call projects released some statistics saying that we're 35% up on sales with them this year than what they were last year, coming off a low base again. But at least even the estates were getting increase in land sales, which is good. So I think we're certainly off the bottom. There's obviously a few things that play into me that's. I've got my chart to check that we're off the bottom, and I start with a little chart. And it's got I like to measure it this way. So my first top 5 value driver is interest rates and affordability.
Yeah.
Now I think the RBA down to 3.6% and stable. We're in a stable in
the vernacular sort of changed a bit. Further cuts.
Yep. So I think
inflation a little bit higher than they.
Yeah, and I think we won't get another inflation drop till November or maybe in early next year now. But if you ask me, my number one affordability measure is that we're on the good side of that at the moment. Supply and demand, we're obviously in a low supply market. Consumer confidence has been historically low. But a lot of information that coming out now saying that we're starting to see retail confidence improve and other things improve. So I think consumer confidence is improving, and so I think that's implying that'll come across and imply to housing as well. Economic growth, we've still got low unemployment, of course, and population growth, which we've had 446,000 people come to the country on net migration numbers so far this year. So all those statistics, all those value drivers suggest that we're off the bottom and we're going more into a demand marketplace.
Most of that's been residential. What are you guys seeing commercial and industrial?
We're seeing some good sales in
Started to
commercial.
move now.
Yeah, we have. And you know, there's not a lot on the market commercially either, is there really? But the stuff that does come on the market where there's a good tenant in place, where there's strong long-term leasing, we're seeing them fly.
Yeah.
And we had which I'm going to mention in a minute, but we had the sale of the Bupa store in Ryrie Street, 120 Ryrie Street, which got 3.83 million, which is really tight, 4.57%.
It's been a while since we've seen that.
We haven't seen a sub 5 in the city sub even 5.5 in the city for a year and a half.
Now, that's probably not the new norm. That's one out of the box because of the tenant.
Yes, don't call me now and expect valuations at 4.5% for the CBD. I think they paid really probably too much. It was a Melbourne buyer. Sold by Fitzroy's in conjunction with Darcy Jarman. So, bloody good buy. Bloody good sale, I should say. Great. Their commissions there. There's also been a good sale down in Ocean Grove with some retail shops. There's been quite some good sales around the traps. But
we're starting to see the investor come back. Yeah. So I think there'll be a little bit more investor stock come onto the market because everyone's been holding it.
Yes.
Because it hasn't been a good time to sell that stuff. So with the balancing out of the yield, you're going to start seeing some investor stock.
And I know people are sitting in property they want to sell that last year they tried to sell it, they couldn't sell it, didn't move or whatever, taken off. It's starting to get to the point where you'd be knocking on their door and saying, hey, come on, get it back on. Because it will go this year. Things will turn. So I think we've turned. I think we're coming out the other side.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that's positive. That's positive. Here. So, Gareth, so popular was your top 5, which I think ended up being top 6 or 7 last episode.
I couldn't cut it down to 5.
Have you given us 5?
Excited.
Have you given us 5?
I've got 5.
You got 5.
I wanted 6. Fitzy wouldn't let me.
Give us your 5 this episode.
Righto. Well, I've broken it into best ofs, right? Yeah. So my
starting at 5 or 1?
No, we're going to have 5, but we'll start on my best. Like if I had a bit of coin at the moment, this is the house I'd buy. So best view. There is about half a dozen properties up there in Bayshore Avenue, Clifton Springs, which actually have their own title right to the title line, which means that they own their own beach, and they sit on top of the cliff with amazing views. You can see Melbourne in the distance.
Private beach.
They have their own private beach. There's a cliff top, private beach, and they sit on top of it. And they've got beautiful big old homes built in, like the 80s and stuff like that. They're beautiful. They don't come up very often, but there's a property there, 126 Bayshore Avenue, Clifton Springs. They're asking $4.3 million for it. Buxton's have got it, Max Hardwick and Alex Westcott. And it's 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and 3 car spots. And it's it's a fantastic house. It's got plenty of potential. $4.3 billion though, it's above what I can afford at the moment. Yep. Unless again I sell your car to get it, but we won't go there.
Anyway.
Not to the cars.
So you've actually broken these up to different categories.
So
that was best view.
That was
next
best
one
view.
is best vineyard. So we're going from having your own beach.
Well,
having your own vineyard.
Because I'm a bit selfish when I make these picks, and I do like when we bottle a red. So I thought, well, best vineyard. There's a property at 41-99 Island Road, Wallington, which is a brand spanker, modern home sitting up on the top of the hill, 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 4-car garage. It's quite nice home, modern and architecturally designed. In-ground pool, spas, decks, all that sort of stuff. It's on 15 hectares, and it's got a beautiful vineyard.
What kind of grapes?
I don't know, but I reckon they'd be some Pinot Noir up there, near Ocean Grove, Wallington. So Wallington sits on the back of Ocean Grove, and it's not far from Ocean Grove. It's a really unique little pocket, if you like, where there's some really nice houses, good little area, not far from Flying Brick side house. So it's a great little spot there. They're asking 4.9 to 5.4, and the agent's Ballarat Property, Toby Lee. So that'll be good to see what happens with that one. Again, it can't afford it. But if I could, I'd buy a vineyard in Wallington.
There we go. Now, you've kind of spoiled best sale.
I did, because it is best sale.
But Ryrie Street.
Ryrie Street. Well, that we've talked about it. Bupa, 120 Ryrie Street was sold, made 3.8 million at sale. There was multiple bidders. It was sold by Fitzroy's, which are a Melbourne commercial agent in conjunction with Darcy Jarman locally. It's it was sold based upon the lease, the strength of the lease. So they had a long-term tenant and national tenant in Bupa, 7-year lease, and quite a substantial lease at that. And then
it hasn't been something to come on the market with a blue chip tenant, long lease.
And that was the
lease.
key, because it was unique, because such a long lease to a blue chip tenant, and I think that, an investor from Melbourne's looked at that and gone, what do you get in Melbourne to get, for that?
Some income.
4.5% yield it got, which is really tight yield for Geelong CBD, as we discussed. So, that easily was the best sale. It's probably the best sale for the last couple of months, really.
Now, your next one you've penned as the most iconic sale.
It is, because we all know Lord of the Isles, or St Lord's Hotel, on the corner there, opposite the pub, opposite the footy ground, I should say. And it's, the family that ran that operated for years. It actually, the leasehold of it sold a couple of years ago to the Black Rhino Group, and they operate it there now. And they had a passing income of $800,000 when they sold this just recently, and they sold it for $12 million. Now, it was underpinned by 60 gaming machines, so that's what underpins the income. But, in terms of it, it's a 20-year lease, so it's a long-term lease. It is parking money. But the yield of it is actually quite high. Okay, considering that we're getting 4.5% yield in the CBD in Ryrie Street, so people are paying a lot more to be in there. The yield for this was 6.6% on the face rent, which is really quite high, giving you a lot of return. A lot of people would struggle to get that in any sort of investment.
And that's
so it's quite a good
of the property, though.
It's just
higher
on the freehold. Yeah, it's just it is at the higher end of the sale. The value. I think they wanted a bit more actually. Against the lease, but they got 6.6%. I would normally see those sales a bit lower than that on the yield, but it just shows you that the pub market has softened quite a lot, and on the hospitality stuff. So that was sold by JL, Will Connolly, did a great job getting someone on that one, so that was good.
And for your last one, you've gone down the sale development opportunity.
Yes.
So give us your number 5.
Well, number 5, I still think it's a great buy, which is 65 to 67 The Terrace and 6 to 9 Park Lane, Ocean Grove. So this was a big building with about, I think we've got 8 tenancies in it or more. And it was sold by Darcy Jarman and Curley's in a conjunction for $6.5 million. And to be anywhere on The Terrace and Ocean Grove is highly sought after. But this is also sitting on a big piece of land of about nearly 1,000 square metres, 960 square metres of land. Land in there is highly sought after. And with a building like that, if you could get all the, subject to the leases and things, but that rings to me as a future high level development, with, coastal views and all that sort of stuff. So it's a highly sought after spot property. So that for me, now that when that sold, that got 5.4% yield. So it's still getting a good return. So it is a land bank, but it's a bloody good spot to get, 8 tenancies on The Terrace in Ocean Grove. They don't come up very often like that.
So all I've got from that is you want to buy a pub, buy a vineyard so you can drink your wine on your private beach.
Yep. And maybe some shops in Ocean Grove so I can just retire. That'd be lovely. That'd be lovely.
Yeah. You would add just a medical practice on that? Or,
that'd be perfect. If I could just that sounds good.
All right, I think it's that time that we interview our guest. So time to have a chat with Richard Bisinella. Well, it's our time to interview our guests, and we've been fortunate enough to be invited into the inner sanctum of Bisinella Developments. So, Richard, thanks very much for having us.
Pleasure.
And inviting us in.
Your name, Bisinella, is now so renowned in the region and so well regarded. And it's got a lot to do with how much the family's put back in to the region over the years. And I always, being in business, and Mike as well, we've always had this discussion in the past that there's more to the story about just getting involved and opening a business, isn't there, in business in Geelong and in this region. You've actually got to join the community and join the village a fair bit. And your family has been absolutely, leading the charge with being involved in the local community. And I've got a list of charities, because I had to get a list because there's so damn many to read out that you're involved with it. And don't have to feel blushed by this, but Lara Cricket Club, Samaritan House, Hope Bereavement, Committee for Geelong, Lara Wildcats, Lara Tennis Club, Lara Sporting Club, Bell Park Sports Club, Drysdale Hawks, Lara Fun Run, Geelong Community Foundation, Lara Bowls Club, Lara Secondary College, Salvation Army, Rotary Club, Anamkara, Bowen Health, and there's probably a dozen more that I've missed out. But your family has been incredibly generous giving back to the community. Do you think that generosity over those years has led to the success as well, as part of the success?
I'll probably answer it this way. It's not that the donations themselves or the support helped grow the business. It's more the attitude or the belief and the sort of the way in which my father started the business, which is that, we grew up in Lara, we're part of the community.
Yeah.
And everything he does, whether it's a residential development, an industrial development or anything, the key importance of giving back to the community, whether that's through, financial support, or volunteering time or resources within the company to support.
A unique and contagious Geelong thing, though, isn't it? That if you want to do business here, you don't go and just give money to these things and think that that's going to happen. It's part of being part of the village. It's just doing your bit.
It's not part of the charm of Geelong as well, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is part of the charm of the region. But it wouldn't, that, your family has led that from the front for so many years that you've actually created that charm in some respects. And you've even now you stay at the forefront of that. You've recently been leading the charge on the incinerator.
Correct.
In Geelong, which is great. I mean, I have my own passion projects that I push as part of my business to try and push things forward in Geelong. And you successfully, hopefully, fingers crossed, have put a nail in the coffin of that damn incinerator. What led you to want to do that?
Yeah, why was that so important for you personally?
Well, without turning the cameras, it's literally sort of only 800 metres to my right here, or to the west of the Yuyangs. It's surrounded by Lara to the north, Lovely Banks, which would be the major new growth area of 15,000 plus homes, to the west, and then to the south you've got Lara and Caraya. So when I first thought about it and became aware of it, I thought this is not going to happen. We put in some objections to the planning process, and I thought, that's it. I'm not going to hear anything of it. And then two residents, Charles Street and Les Dew from the community approached me and said, this is actually going to get legs. And I said, I just don't believe it. But, I let them know that I put some objections in. Thankfully, then they let me know. And I'm very rarely on social media. I mainly use it just for business. And I noticed that the EPA approved the license sort of literally 2.5 weeks before Christmas.
Yeah, I could believe that.
2.5 weeks before Christmas.
Yeah.
And, ringing my lawyers, finding out what the process is. We had 14 days to put in an appeal. And if we didn't put the appeal in the 14 days, we lose all the rights.
Yeah.
And we weren't notified by the EPA. We found out accidentally through Facebook.
Timing wasn't by accident 2 weeks before Christmas.
Well, it definitely looks like that, doesn't it? So, we spoke to I spoke to the lawyer, got an indication of what we could and couldn't do, and we became aware that there were appeal rights there, and we had a good crack at them. But then I needed to have a chat with the family and my dad, most importantly. And I sort of said to Dad, I explained from my perspective, which was that, us objecting to this, whether we do or don't object to it, our business is going to continue. But we're not. But I said I think we should support the community on this matter. Not because it will do anything to our business, but because if we don't, then who else will?
Yeah.
And the community, although they had the full of the emotions, and they had the energy, and there was a lot of them, they obviously don't. You need the sort of the legal background, planning background. Not that I've got a legal planning background, but after 28 years in the business, I make sure that every time I spend $1 with a lawyer, I remember what he tells me or she tells me. Remember what she tells you or he tells you, because you want to remember next time, so you use it. So said to my father said, absolutely, we've got to stand up for this. He was as disappointed as I was, and so was the rest of the family. So we made the decision to put the objection in. And then that was sort of, a long sort of drawn out process in court and VCAT. We lost the first VCAT appeal, but we since appealed that at the Supreme Court. But then to sort of get into the nutshell of it, there were sort of 3 key approvals that they needed to build this thing.
Yeah.
They needed an EPA license, which they got, but we're challenging at the Supreme Court. And we've also got a VCAT merits review. They needed a cap license from Energy Vic, which is an approval because the government's capped the amount of these types of waste to energy facilities. And they've capped it at the limit at 2.5 million tonnes of burning or waste to energy projects. And then the third thing they needed is a planning permit. Now, the planning permit hasn't been decided, it's still with the minister. But in regards to the cap licence, the second item, the government recently made a decision that they issued a number of licences. They issued, by memory, 2.23 or 2,350,000, tonne of approvals, which only left 150,000 tonne. Now, this facility, they were seeking 400,000 tonne. So if you imagine 400,000 tonne, that's 1,000 tonne of rubbish going every day. And you imagine a garbage truck might hold 20 to 30 tonne. So you do the maths of how many trucks are coming in here. Now,
It'd be taking rubbish from all over Melbourne and everything, wouldn't it? Like it's not just cleaning up our own rubbish. It's bringing rubbish from all of bloody Melbourne and everything as well, isn't it?
Well, the key, that's the absolute key is the key is they never prepared a business case. The City Grade of Geelong, the previous Mayor Sullivan and Mayor Contell have both come out, as well as the rest of the organisation and the local councillors have come out saying we're not supporting the project and we're not going to bring our waste there.
Yeah.
So if the waste is not coming from there,
How does it get that far then through the process?
$1 million question.
Yeah.
We don't understand it. So how could a proposal get this far when there's yet to be an explanation as to where they're getting the waste from? So my perspective is, it's not people say this is Geelong and we're NIMBYs. No, it's not Geelong is the NIMBYs. Melburnians and the people in Melbourne and Spring Street are the NIMBYs, because they're trying to bring their waste problem into Geelong.
It's just ignorant, isn't it? Like absolutely ignorant and naive of all the issues. We're trying to build our growth corridors. We talk about housing needs and affordability. One of our biggest growth corridors is the Northern Growth Corridor, which would be just the other side of that waste plant, which makes no sense. We're going to go and build, 50,000 houses up there which we've been in planning for 15 years.
A suburb like Ballarat there, aren't you?
Yeah. And then you're going to try and put a waste plant as big as that, pumping out stuff across their roofs. I mean, that's just ridiculous planning. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense at all, let alone the houses that they've got to drive past and already the growth of current Lara,
And I think one of the most, besides the potential health impacts and the amenity impacts, it would be a structure which would be the smokestack 80 metres tall, which is taller than the Cardinia Park lights, which are 70 metres tall.
Jeez.
The building itself would be...
It'd actually be the highest structure in Geelong.
100%, bigger than the MoMA. Yeah. The building itself would be bigger than bigger than the convention centre building. So you would have a big Lego block, bigger than the convention centre, which is the building plus the smokestack on top.
Pumping out waste all over.
But some of the key things that have sort of been unique in this sort of, community-led is sort of the people that have got behind it. Yes, you've got the big Lara, people in community in Geelong. Like I mentioned, Mayor Contell, who's come out against it. Richard Miles, our local member, who was out on site. You can search him out on YouTube, together with Ella George, who's pivotal against it. The committee for Geelong, we held the breakfast at the committee with the chamber, 150 business people.
It was almost bipartisan support against it, wasn't it?
Correct. Yep.
It's insane.
But the key, maybe just to sort of finish with this, the biggest key that I grab comfort that this project is dead is what Ella George said once the cap licence was refused. She's come out saying publicly there will be no big incinerator in Lara.
Getting into business. You've got interests all over the place with land development, very successful at the moment. You've got about 6 or 7 different estates on the go with over 1,000 lots across the region. So obviously the debate around housing affordability and access to land and purchasing, that sort of thing, would be right at the forefront of your mind. Have you got some comments around affordability and what do you think some of the bigger issues are?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest challenges are with all the extra layers. It's like a reverse onion where rather than peeling the layers off the onion, we're adding more and more layers.
The red
this
tape.
Onion, red tape. Red tape, sometimes people can use red tape as if it's sort of like, can I oversimplify it, but you sort of look at some of I don't mind red tape or extra layers. It's more the time that things take.
Yeah.
So just because you add an extra approval in place, it shouldn't take that long. I was mentioning to earlier on that when I started 28 years ago, we did a rezoning just down the road, 150 lots, right against the township of Lara. There was no structure plan in place at the time, and that rezoning took us about 1.5 to 2 years to get through. Now, if you've got a permit, if something was zoned and you've got a planning permit in that period, you would be very happy to have it through in that point in time. Now, as far as how long would it take to get a rezoning of that similar, parcel, if the land was designated in a structure plan, you'll be looking at least 3 to 5 years. If it's outside of a structure plan, you'll be looking at least 10 years. You look at all the growth areas in Lovely Banks, which were designated to urban growth zone, which happened 11 years ago when the previous government was in place. There is not a single PSP approved there, and there is not a single lot that has been able to start selling or constructing there. So over that 10-year journey, Geelong has continued to rely upon the growth areas that were approved sort of decades ago, which was Armstrong Creek,
Yeah.
and the land that we're developing in Lara, which the growth area, and this is not critical to council, the planning that council have done in regards to Lara West or Armstrong Creek, I'm supportive of all that process. What needs to happen is that the state government is the head umpire in regards to planning. It needs to take the leadership and support local government with infrastructure, with resources to help unlock these processes. It seems to me at the moment that that the government is all more than happy for this debate to be in the media, where the renters say it's the homeowners are the problem because they're buying all the houses, and then the homeowners are saying it's all the renters. It's like the government would love to see that argument take place because it's not holding accountability to the government when in my view they are the umpire. And if you're the umpire, you take accountability and you take responsibility. No different than
at the end of the day, it's a supply and demand problem, and it's a supply and demand driven by the fact that we've made too many hurdles in front of creating supply, and so demand has pushed up prices where they are. But it's also things that are pushing up prices are things that are outside mum and dad's realm. Like mum and dad can't control cost of goods and cost of materials and things like that. And since the government's brought in the NCC in 2016, the National Construction Code, we've seen prices rise by 45.6% over that period of time. And every time they've done 6 reviews of that, and every time they do a review, the average cost of building a house goes up by about 25%. And luckily, they've just announced that there's one thing that came out of the summit, that they've put the National Construction Code on hold. We've had the RBA has lowered interest rates. We're down at 3.6%. They're talking maybe another one in November, maybe next year now with where the interest rates are going.
Inflation.
So, and we have seen some statistics come out by projects fairly recently saying that we've had the 4th month in a row more than over 100 lot sales in Geelong, which is still not huge sales, but it is coming off a low base, about a 35% increase in sales. Are you optimistic about where we're going? Are you optimistic that we're going to, into next year, we're going to see an increase in land sales, a return of first home buyers, a return of demand for these lots?
I'm always optimistic. and what I mean by that is you need to have a long-term view.
Yeah.
And my view is you're taking a long-term view, because buying a home, if you're going to buy a home for yourself, or if my kids were going to buy, and my kids are not at that stage, but they're sort of, in their 20s, they could be in the stage to buy a home. If they were going to be doing it, I'd be saying, do it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
If you're going to be buying a home to live in, is that house at that price at the right choice? And then, can you afford it, and how do you make those decisions? Rather than what's the interest rate today.
They were questions you probably wouldn't have asked 15 years ago, though, would you? But in terms of dollar for dollar, in terms of your wage versus a mortgage, I think the background is always, you go and buy something. Never in our vocab was, can you afford it or whatever. It was, that's what you did. But now it is a real question.
Yeah, 100%. Sort of, you look at your sort of the median price and I'm just sort of focused on land, which is sort of what we focus in. 20 years ago, you didn't have the sort of the sudden increases in land. I mean, you're sort of seen with sort of when every time there's sort of a constraint on land supply through rezonings and approvals, the cost to buy vacant in Globo land goes up significantly.
Yeah.
Which then means that the cost to bring that product to supply increases,
and it all gets
as well.
On.
It gets increased as well because there are more people competing to it. I always give the analogy, development business is like running a coffee shop. If you're gonna say to open up a coffee shop, it's gonna take a 5 to 10 year approval process. I can guarantee you, the cost of buying coffee is going to go up.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a lot harder for those businesses to get up and operating. So it's sort of very similar. And obviously, if the cost of beans are going up, the cost of coffee is going to go up.
And it's, all indices sort of show that we want to double the population here in a short amount of time, really. So it's like exactly what you're saying in terms of your approval process, in terms of, your growth corridors. Where are the houses coming from?
Where are they coming from? One of the interesting stats I found across the pandemic, and we had our big trough where prices fell back, corrected, we would say, especially in other growth corridors like Armstrong's Creek. We had, price corrections of 30% in some areas and 25%. Back to, a circa medium house price of $670 when they were at $750. The interesting thing is that Lara never went back. Lara was one of the only growth corridors in Victoria that maintained its medium house price right through that correction, and in fact has come out the other side with stronger growth again than what we've had in some of the other growth corridors. You guys, a lot of those are the estates that you guys built. Is there any secret in the sauce with that?
We're not. There's obviously a number of other players that are developing in Lara as well, and everyone's doing an excellent job, as well as a number of existing houses. I think that the key advantage to Lara, besides its geographical beauty with the yu-yangs and the lifestyle, is its proximity to Melbourne. Yeah. So if you look at traditionally when a suburb prices decrease, it's because demand's decreasing, right? So there's less demand. Then if somebody wants to sell, they either choose not to sell or they've got to adjust their price expectations. The advantage for Lara has been that a number of people from the western suburbs of Melbourne have chosen to get to come out of those areas into Lara. And the reason why I say they probably come to Lara is because they still want to commute easily to Melbourne. Yep. So the demand has sort of stayed, whereas the other suburbs, which didn't have that opportunity or that proximity to Melbourne.
It is also the infrastructure. I mean, in Armstrong's Creek, when they were designing that, they were going to bring in the industrial precinct in there that was going to provide jobs. Yes. That never eventuated. But what has happened is the GREP, Geelong Ring Road Employment Precinct, which is developed, on the fringes of Lara, between Lara and Geelong, and it's quite a successful precinct now, providing thousands of jobs, and that's got to have had some impact on why the house prices stay the same, why that
real job
growth continues. There's jobs here. There's also Avalon on the other side of Lara. So you've got connections to Melbourne, you've got jobs, you've got access, you've got a train service. So it's got all the infrastructure right, doesn't it, for growth and for continued growth. And it's something you guys obviously are aware of because you've also diversified into industrial development. You've got a recent announcement for 12 large industrial sheds to be built in Geelong, and they'd be the biggest sheds we've probably got in the region, wouldn't they, Mike?
I think for probably the last 5 years, everyone's built 100 square metre man caves, so to speak. So in terms of the pepped up demand for larger industrial is certainly there, and I think you're talking 1,500 square metres up to
8,000. 500, yeah.
Big sheds, the 12 of them.
Yes, 12. So that sort of business park is on some land we owned on Hills Road in Coria. The business, we own a number of warehouses which we built to lease, and we've got an existing portfolio. That's actually something that mentioning earlier that Dad actually started into. He built some very early sheds sort of 40 years ago, and some of those sheds we still own and still lease. The reason why I'm sort of confident in regards to building these sheds, which we said we're looking to start 2 sheds next year, one around 3,800 and one 4,000, is because, build it and they'll come. That I'm often get a phone call and I end up referring it to my friends next to me that, somebody saying I want, a 4,000 square metre shed. And I say, yep, we can provide that. And I need it in 8 months. I said, can't do 8 months. I could do a year and a half. So I got to get the permit. I've got to build it. And I said, no, literally, my lease is expiring. I need it in 8 months. I said, okay, well, ring the
I've had quite a few, actually, of those over the years where people have rung me from big facilities looking to come to Geelong, and they just can't because they don't have sheds. And they go, have you got, even over 2,000 square metres, you get someone ring up and you go, it won't need anything over 2,000 square metres, anything up to 5,000 square metres, you go, there isn't anything.
Yeah, and generally at that size, something will go pretty quickly. Yeah.
And one of the exciting things for us is we ran that planning process through the development facilitation, which is through the state government arm of planning, which we had a great experience with. And as part of that, we did some economic modelling to sort of forecast a number of jobs. But out of that, once it's fully developed, there's an estimate around 435 full-time jobs.
Yeah, and that plays back into the housing, 100%. Back in the States. It's just you get both sides of the coin.
And then indirect jobs, and then those businesses need coffee shops, they need truck repairs.
Yep.
They need consultancy services and other services which they'll use in the Geelong region, and suppliers, you name it. So it's positive for Geelong.
It's fantastic for Geelong. What your family does and what you're doing here is always optimistic and really good and having a go, and it's fantastic to see, and thank you very much.
So, Richard, conversely, we've just spoken about the industrial side of things. How about residentially?
Yeah. So at the moment, we've sort of got a few residential estates but majority of them are in Lara. We've got the Lara Lakes estate, which is a 520 lot estate at 16 stages. We're in just completed 8 stages, and we've got the 9th stage under construction. Each stage is around 35 lots. We've got another estate in Flinders Avenue, which is a 47 lot estate, so that's under construction now. We've got another 33 lots in Bath Street, Lara, as well as some land in St Leonard's.
Yeah, it's only not just a little bit of land in St Leonard's. You've got 230 lots in St Leonard's, haven't you?
230.
It's quite a big development.
230 lots. That market sort of dropped off.
Yeah.
Which has been no surprise. That whole area has dropped off. But Lara and the northern suburbs have remained steady. That being said, in St Leonard's, we're building a number of spec houses.
Oh, yeah.
To sell.
It's a good, beautiful spot. Leopold as well. 70 lots in Leopold.
Yeah, 70 lots in Leopold, which is sort of will be one of the last sort of growth areas to occur in that area under the sort of the new current zonings. So that's, ideal location.
Was that a bit strange having to get in the car and drive outside of Lara to go to?
No, it's good. It's good.
Change of scenery.
St Leonard's is always nice to drive to.
Any connections of Rich? Why to St Leonard's?
We got off of the land by a good man who you know, Ken Drysdale.
Oh right, yes, yeah.
And Ken showed us
the man in the hat.
Dad, Ken,
bless his soul, actually.
Ken rang Dad, true gentleman, and showed us the land, and we shook his hand, and we bought the property. It was a beautiful property.
Yes, one of the actual beautiful men of our industry, and he passed 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
And he called me from his bed to tell me he was going to pass about a week or a couple of days beforehand. So, yeah, absolute gentleman, wasn't he? Yeah, I miss him.
Yeah.
What's the next 10 years of Geelong look like for you?
Well, I'm hoping in the next 2 or 3 years we'll see some significant growth occurring within Lovely Banks. Although we've got no direct land in Lovely Banks, I think it's critical that Geelong continues to provide land supply, so that it, so that there's options and choice and availability, as well as the Creamy Road growth areas. So I'm hoping those areas really kick off. I've got no direct control or interest in the CBD, but I understand there's a number of residential developments that are sort of having their challenges to get off the ground.
Yep.
Yes.
And tell me all about it if you want. If you've got another hour,
I'm hoping they sort of go ahead, because Geelong needs a number of areas to.
But that's where it's interesting, because you've got housing developments in the greenfield can stack up. They can make sense, and you can go and you can buy your 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom home.
Yep.
And you've got a decent block at 450, 500 square meters, and you can pay 750 to 850 for that in that thing. But for the same money to make them feasible to build in the apartments, you're only going to get a 2-bedroom apartment for that sort of money. It might be 60 to 70 square meters of size. So you have to spend almost twice as much, because what people don't understand, the construction cost of apartments is twice as much as a house, or 3 times as much. In fact, a house might cost you 2,000 square meter build and a spec home, and your apartment market, you can't build them for less than 6.5.
Yeah.
So people talk about, we're going to get our population and our affordable housing out of apartments. But that's not true.
Yeah,
it's going to come out of the greenfield estates. It's going to come out of Lara, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of there's a lot of family builders.
Yeah,
I'm talking builders that, mum and dad, who built between 3 or 5 houses a year, and they built their 3 or 5, and then you've got another builder.
Yeah.
Those sort of builders, they can't do commercial.
No.
Because they don't have the systems or the capacity to do it. Whereas there are a lot of, small builders, plus your other builders, and with all them together, that's where your supply comes.
Yeah.
And that's where it's, there's a lot of competition there and they built some, beautiful homes. So that's why I think, building a standard house on a block is so much easier.
That's where we're going to get affordability come back. That's where we're going to get supply. And I think that the government's got a lot to do when it comes to bureaucracy of how to build both apartments to make them feasible. They've got to get that underlying rate up. You know, we've got to make, and going back to what I do in Market Square and stuff, Mike, you'll laugh, but there's got to be a value proposition. There's not a value proposition yet between buying in a CBD apartment and buying a house in the estate, because you're going to get, to be honest, more in the estate. Yeah. We have to get to the point where Geelong CBD is a bit more to offer. True. But we've got a bit way to go there.
Well, Richard, thank you for sharing your family business story, and your generosity to our community is paramount. So thanks for your time on Propped, and thanks for having us in your offices.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Well, it is time for us to sign off on another edition of Propped. Just want to thank Richard Bisinella for his time and providing extraordinary insight to all things Geelong and development.
They do just more than development, like the leadership that they've shown around Geelong for many years, and you know, and getting involved, and there's that many charities they support. It's you know, the incinerator thing, just really, you know, sticking their neck out and doing what others needed done, and for the community. That's what makes them a special business for Geelong, and a legacy.
And people that are prepared to pull up their sleeves for the community.
Yeah, it's good to see them.
So
good to see.
Anyway, usual thank yous. Thanks to Chris and Fitzy behind the cameras. If you want to continue to hear from us, don't forget to subscribe. Otherwise, we'll see you for another edition of Propped.